This is one of the more remarkable feral cat moments I've ever caught on camera. It was exciting just to see a magnificent bobcat in full stalking mode, but then to see a feral tomcat stalking right behind the bobcat was even more remarkable. His tail down low like that means he's on alert and tense. So let's break this down in slow motion with enhanced video. Here you can see the tomcat carefully watching and following the bobcat, not 15 feet behind. As soon as the bobcat passes the small clearing in the dense forest undergrowth, the tomcat enters the clearing and follows to the edge and continues to watch the bobcat from behind. It's hard to believe any animal as wily as the ghost-like bobcat would not know it's being followed so closely while hunting, but it appears the feral cat remained undetected. Here the tomcat continues to sit on the edge of the clearing watching while the blue jays sound the alarm on the bobcat intruding into their territory. This was not a one-time isolated instance. This tomcat already had a history with the bobcats. In fact, this big feral tom had a habit of keeping tabs on the bobcats that share the forest and was always shadowing the bobcats passing through his territory. Stay tuned as those encounters are presented later. This feral tomcat had been the dominant cat of these parts until he got injured in a fight with a raccoon, and the new big tomcat took over his territory. Some of you may know him already from past videos. He remains in the forest today, keeping a low profile, deferring to the new big tomcat, and is never seen near bobcats. This cat is a savvy survivor. On the rare occasions I saw him, he always had this rather contemptuous expression displayed here. I'll put links to his backstories in the description. But this stunning feral tomcat was now the new big cheese of these parts. Those huge cheek jowls are indicative of a lot of testosterone in this intact male in the prime of his life. These cats may well be related, with this cat being maybe a year or two younger than the other. Both of these feral tomcats were largely nocturnal or crepuscular, and would only rarely be seen near the fence line separating the backyard from the jungle at dusk and dawn, as in these examples. So what is really going on here? Does the feral tomcat have a death wish, as he would surely lose any encounter with the big bobcats? Is he being proactive, better to be on the offensive than surprised and defensive, or just ruled by strong hormones to hold his territory for food and mating? Such wild feral cat behavior has not been documented on video before. I'll try and interpret it and present the raw video documentation. As much as possible, the videos are time-stamped and presented in chronological order. Feel free to comment and please subscribe if you enjoy this type of unique content on YouTube. This little piece of open territory where animal trails converge in the middle of the dense saw palmetto and scrub oak understory of a subtropical pine forest is the feral cat's prime real estate, his territory. There is every indication he takes his territory very seriously and marks it often and reads the scent of his rivals carefully. The tomcat's territory is quite small compared to the bobcat's much larger territory. For years there were no feral cats visiting the backyard at all. Then for the last few years just the one feral tomcat who pretty much kept to himself in the jungle. Then there was an influx of feral cats, probably due to rampant development nearby and habitat destruction, that affected the feral cats just like other wild animals, forcing them into crowded remaining green spaces with more competition for food and safe territory for mating and raising their young. Occasionally, bobcats would stay in the tomcat's territory for a while before moving on to hunt elsewhere in their territory. The big tomcat's health and hormones were in peak condition, and he was very protective of his territory, and he had a feral girlfriend. Perhaps in his mind it's better to be proactive and super vigilant, patrolling his range and keep a close ear and eye out for the bobcats and keep them in front of him rather than be surprised. But to actually increase the chances of a direct conflict is a pretty high-risk strategy. But this territory was prime with good hunting due to hundreds of rats and mice per acre, not to mention thousands of tasty lizards and such, and good dense cover everywhere for security. In theory, all this marking of territory reduces conflict with other felines and animals. Early on the morning of November 30th, the tomcat went to his favorite place to day nap, overlooking the prime open area of his territory, where trails converge and cross, his inner sanctum, if you will, where he felt secure while resting and allowed him to be alert to arrivals at a distance. I enhanced the video and zoomed in so you can see him resting, but always listening. If you watch closely, you'll see his ears are always up and twitching. He stayed here from 6:54 a.m. right up to about 10:50 a.m. before the bobcat arrived in the same area. He likely retreated quickly out of the way and then followed the bobcat. After the bobcat's intrusion right into the heart of his territory, the tomcat spent the rest of the day stirred up and boldly patrolling back and forth across his favorite spot. Yet just a few hours later in the early evening, a big bobcat was back, putting a fresh scent spray on the tree in his sanctuary. The morning of November 24th, the feral tom came out briefly in the morning, as the cats did on occasion, to catch some sun at the fence line, since there was no sun in the jungle understory. Just before 3 p.m., the female feral cat enters the backyard, then quickly runs for cover. And we know why, because the camera in the forest shows a large bobcat moving through the forest and heading to the fence line, arriving just a few minutes later. I was trying to trap these feral cats with catnip for medical treatment, neutering, and transfer to a cat colony during this time, and was unaware of all the feline drama going on until I reviewed the videos later. At this time, the trap was wired open and not baited, so the cats could go in and out freely until ready for capture. This stunning bobcat spent about a minute surveying the backyard for prey and then moved back into the jungle. The bobcats never showed any interest in the trap or catnip bait. Remarkably, the big bobcat was being watched by the feral tomcat during this time, and just 2 minutes later the big tom was right behind the bobcat, holding his ground in the prime open spot of his territory, where all animals pass. A bold and seemingly risky thing to do, but he knew what he was doing. Just watch his manner and expression. After about 18 minutes of watching, he moves on satisfied apparently that his territory is safe. Later at dusk he visits the trap briefly, which was not baited at the time, but probably had a bit of lingering catnip odor, and then he moved on. In the early morning of November 26, we get a look at the tomcat and his feral girlfriend. You can see the importance of this area as a communication hub for scent marking as they read the signs, and the tom adds a bit of scent mark himself. Later that evening at 5:08 p.m., the tomcat visits the backyard, and at 5:09 p.m., the bobcat enters the middle of his territory. The tomcat was of course aware of this intrusion, and likely watching, and what is interesting in all these close passes is that the bobcats never showed any indication that they knew they were being shadowed or watched. The bobcats on rare occasions stop by the fence line to see if a squirrel or rabbit might be grazing or hiding nuts in the open, although both small mammals actually live in the jungle behind the fence. You can't tell if the bobcat caught anything in this clip, but it passed through the tomcat's sanctuary without him knowing this time. And you can see he always reads the scents like a book later to know what was going on. It was time to set the trap for Big Tom. The same reinforced trap that the older tomcat had escaped from twice. But there was little doubt it would be successful after offering them free use for over a month. I monitored the trap with a Campark 4G cell game camera, so I would know in real time as soon as he was caught, and cover him up and get him to shelter. Live monitoring of traps and only catching them in the daytime makes it much less stressful on the cats. I don't know how much longer the tomcat's risky game of cat and mouse with the bobcats would have lasted. After the tomcat was removed, the bobcats roamed where his territory and their territory overlapped more often, indicating that he may have had a larger impact on their movements than expected, and this has not been demonstrated before to my knowledge. There are somewhat mixed feelings when removing a feral cat from their wild environment, especially one as interesting as this big tomcat. Every feral cat that exists can trace its situation back to the actions of a human. Humans are the only cause of the feral cat problem. The cats are just being cats and dealing with their lot in life. He was inspected by a vet, provided medical attention, neutered, given all his shots and dewormed, and had his ear clipped, and released, and will live out his life without contributing his no doubt considerable mating abilities to producing many more feral cats in the future.